Marriage is awesome. That's what they tell us, right? I mean, there's been studies that show that people that are married are happier, that their lives are more stable, they live longer, it's better financially, but I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't get married. And here's my argument for why. Hi, my name is Tyus, and I make videos about how to live a freer life. And that alone should be the final argument on why you shouldn't get married. A nice, free life. But wait, there's more. Of course there's more. If you care about living a free life, hit the subscribe button, because as a person that makes YouTube videos, I am required to ask you to hit subscribe at least 3 times per video. It's the rules. I don't make them. So we're going to talk about marriage. As I mentioned before the bumper, there are all kinds of reasons why people suggest you get married. They say that people that are married are happier, they're better at raising children, they live longer, they have greater stability in their life. There's a ton of financial reasons that people give. But let's look at every single one of those points systematically and give me an opportunity to rip them apart with my teeth. Human happiness is something that is extremely well documented, and we've done the comparisons. We know that people who are married report at least 40% of the time that they're happy, while people that are not married report that they're happy about 20% of the time. So that means that married people are twice as happy as people who are not married or divorced. Twice as happy is a huge statistic. Why could that possibly be the case? In the book, The Paradox of Choice, written by Barry Schwartz, I just could not remember the name, he lays out a really strong argument for why having more choice actually leads to less happiness. So if you're not married, you end up having more choices. You end up having more options as far as who you could date, who you might be able to see, who you might go and hang out with. I have no idea what the difference between terms are anymore. Dating, seeing somebody, hanging out, we're together, we're a couple. I have no idea what's the differentiators here. But my point is, if you're married, you're locked in a relationship. Your choices have been removed by you. It's voluntary, but you don't have the choice to see a lot of other people. And because of that, because of reduced choice, Barry makes a very powerful point that you become happier because of that. Now, I've seen this in real life. I know people that have joined the military and they say, man, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And yet they seem to be getting beat up and run through drills and yelled at by sergeants. And I think maybe when they don't have any other options available to them, they just default and say, you know what, at least I'm happy with the situation I'm in. Another example is prisoners who are sentenced to very long-term stays in prison actually prefer to stay in prison than to be released. I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but the data shows that it's true. Oftentimes, if you give people more choices, they don't like that choice. There's a lot of extra added pressure there. And that might be one of the reasons why married people say they're happier than unmarried people. Now, I know that was kind of a weak argument, so let me strengthen it up a bit. There's a professor of the London School of Economics named Paul Dolan, and Paul has studied this in a lot more detail than most economists. He has been quoted as saying married people are happier than other population subgroups, but only when their spouse is in the room and when they're asked how happy they are. When the spouse is not present, they say they're miserable. That's a quote from him, not from me. Apparently, people like to say that they're really happy when their spouse is there because it's important to keep up appearances or to make them feel good about how they're doing in a relationship, when in reality, people are actually miserable in marriages. This is documented in his book called Happy Ever After. I am not gonna lie, I am pretty excited about this carbonated water. This video is brought to you by Bubbly because Tyus couldn't afford the name brand stuff. So, another reason that people suggest you should get married is because it's better to raise children that way. Kids thrive in predictable, secure environments, no doubt about it. However, a lot of families, a lot of homes right now don't have fathers in them, and we've seen that most youth suicides come from homes without fathers present. 75% of adolescent murders come from fatherless homes, and 85% of children with behavioral disorders don't have fathers in the household. If a father figure is so important in the upbringing of a child, the question should be asked, why do family courts show a gender bias toward mothers rather than fathers? They almost always retain custody of children. Single fathers only represent 15% of single-parent families. However, they generally seem to be better single parents than mothers. I know people are going to be so mad at me about that, but there is data on this. They make more money than single mothers. They also are 2.5 times more likely to be cohabitants, which basically means they're more likely to live with somebody else, whether that's a girlfriend or a roommate or whatnot, but that provides additional support for children. And what we do know is children who are raised with more adult supervision, with more support, are going to end up doing a lot better. It's just a fact. And ultimately, if you're in an unhappy marriage, it is better to get divorced than it is to raise a child in a divided household. We also know that for a fact. So I don't think children is the reason to get married, or stay married for that matter. Another reason to get married is because studies have shown that you actually end up living longer, especially men for some reason. Now there's a few arguments for why this might be the case. Most people think that it's because men are less likely to see doctors than women, and married men are often going to be taken care of by a supporting wife, or at least historically that's been the case, because that gap of life expectancy with marriage is actually shortening. That gap is becoming smaller and smaller, probably because of technology, but also because there's a lot of healthcare innovations and healthcare has become more and more available. I know it doesn't feel that way, given the state of healthcare, not only in our country, but worldwide. But believe it or not, healthcare has gotten better over time. But is living longer really worth it if you're living an unhappy life? One of my favorite comedians, Bill Burr, makes the point that you should follow your dreams because a lot of people are afraid to do it in fear that they're going to end up living on a futon or sleeping on a futon in their 30s. But let me quote him directly. Realize that sleeping on a futon when you're in your 30s is not the worst thing. You know what's worse? Sleeping in a king bed next to a wife that you're not really in love with, but for some reason you married, and you got a couple of kids, and you got a job you hate. You'll be lying there fantasizing about sleeping on a futon. There's no risk when you go after a dream. There's a tremendous amount of risk in playing it safe. I think he nails the point of go after what you want, and there's a lot of people that are in really unhappy marriages. If that is the fear, that is not the reason to stay in a marriage. If you want to live longer because you're afraid of dying, that doesn't necessarily mean you're living happier, as we discussed in the previous point in this video. But it's been argued that married people are going to have more stability in their life, and I think that's completely true. I think you're going to end up having a more steady job and a much more likely have a steady routine in your world. However, I would argue, is that steadiness, is that stability really what you want, or is that a lack of flexibility in what you're capable of doing? Do you want a life that feels routine and boring and stagnant, or do you want to go out there and live something exciting, something that's noteworthy, something that gets your heart pounding more than caffeinated sparkling water? One of the more well-documented arguments for getting married is that people who are single end up paying more than people who are married. In other words, marriage saves you money. The Bureau of Labor has reported that single people pay $1,120 more per year than married people. And to me, this makes a ton of sense. If you're living in the same space, when you turn on the light, it lights up the room for both people. You don't have to air condition one room and then another room for another person. You guys are sharing the space, it's going to save money there, and things like medical insurance is also generally discounted. Car insurance is generally discounted for couples, things of that nature. However, there's something to keep in mind here. A divorce costs about $15,000 per person. Now that's according to a survey done from Bankrate. But that means that's $30,000 per couple. If you're married for 14 years or less and you get a divorce, it costs you significantly more money to be married. And therefore, unless your marriage is a success 15 years or longer, it doesn't make financial sense to get married. We know the numbers on this. Half of marriages end in divorce, except if it's an arranged marriage, in which case it's only about 4%. Those seem to work out significantly better. They're not marrying for love. They're marrying for, well, who knows the reason. They're marrying because they've been told that they're getting married. But of that half of people that stay married, 20% report openly that they're unhappy. And from earlier in this video, I talked about the fact that that statistic is probably dramatically underreported. where most people in marriages are actually unhappy, and that's the ones that chose not to get divorced. So what are your options? Your options are to get into a marriage where if you get divorced, it's going to cost you a tremendous amount of money and make you unhappy, or you get into a marriage and you're most likely going to live unhappily. There are justifiable, unemotional reasons to get or stay married, one of which happens to be tradition. Another might be inheritance. Maybe you want to pass on the wealth you've made to this person. A third, perhaps, could be medical care. I married my ex-wife specifically because her insurance was running out. Looking back, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. A fourth reason could be child custody. My parents stayed married until I turned 18 years old. They were in a miserable marriage, and I wish they hadn't continued it, but they did because they wanted their kids to reach adulthood before they got a divorce. It would have been better for us had they got a divorce much sooner. At its fundamental level, a marriage is nothing more than an agreement between two people to be in a relationship, a really, really long relationship. And what blows my mind is, for some reason, the state, the government, or religious institutions feel the need to be able to dictate that arrangement. Whether that is with tax benefits, whether that is with access to their church, whatever the case. There should be no reason why a government or an institution needs to be involved in my arrangements with other people. And so the idea of getting married for tax benefits or for a discount on insurance or whatever the case may be, for citizenship, those seem like really terrible situations that are enforced by a government that should have no role in marriage at all. There is unquestionably reasons to be with somebody in a relationship. There's fantastic things that people bring to each other's lives in relationships, whether that's a friendship or a marriage or whatever the case may be. However, there are so many drawbacks to getting married. I don't see the reason to justify it, because you can simply be in a relationship with somebody without being married to them. So why not do that? Why not just be with somebody for the rest of your life because you love them, because you want to be in that relationship with them, because they add value to your life and you add value to theirs? There's no need for it to be stamped by a church or a government. I hope you find these videos interesting, insightful, maybe entertaining. And if you do, please share them with people you care about. Please subscribe below. Like I said, I've got to say it multiple times. It's the rules. And I hope to see you on the next video.